Welcome to the Nerdstalgic Podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic Podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. As per usual, before we get into today's wonderful, absolutely incredible episode and topic, I want to do a bit of housekeeping because I like to keep my house nice and clean. So make sure that you follow me on Twitter at nerdstalgic_pod to be kept up to date on everything and anything that I'm doing. Also, if you listen to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, liking and commenting, because the way the YouTube algorithm works is that if you leave a like and leave a comment, that boosts the video up and more people get to see it, which then means more subscribers and the channel grows. So if you've already subscribed, that's how you can help me out. And if you haven't subscribed, just subscribe and like and comment. Both will help me out greatly. Also, one more thing, if you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to leave a star rating. I'll remind you all at the end if you haven't done so yet, or if you just want to listen to the episode. But make sure you leave a rating between 1 to 5 stars. That way, again, like YouTube, I go up the Spotify algorithm and the show gets seen a lot more by more people. So if you could do all those things at the very, very beginning or at the end, if you like, that will help me out immensely. So today's topic is Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Oh, now, if you listened to my review about a couple of months ago now, to be honest, as of recording this, I reviewed Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, and I actually love that movie. I gushed over that movie. I'm a huge fan of pirates, and I'm not just mean the Pirates franchise, but I mean pirates in general, about pirate history, about everything to do with pirates and pirate law and the pirate code and all that. Like, I went into huge amount of detail of my love and the history behind pirates. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff and you want to hear my thoughts and feelings on the Black Pearl, then please do go back and check that episode out. It's a cracker. It's a fantastic episode, and I do highly recommend it. Not just because I did it; it's just really good episode. But today we're going to be talking about Dead Man's Chest. I think, to be honest, they took what the first one did and just went even further. With like, the first movie is perfect. Like, it's one of them films that I hardly have any issues with. That not just because of rose tinted glasses. I could watch it without having the rose tinted glasses on and still enjoy it. There's not many things that are an issue or I don't like or too hard to swallow or that sort of thing. Generally, I think about the first movie, in my opinion, is perfect. It is one of those rare sort of perfect movies. And I think a lot of people agree with me, because majority of people really like the first film, and then most people start to fall off as they go along, which, fair enough. But I feel like as a pirate adventure that is grounded and sort of stays true to the ride and, you know, to the world of pirates, the first film does a great job. And then from there, obviously being a big success and then going off and making absolutely buku money, you knew that the sequels were going to be more bombastic, were going to be bigger, heavier, a lot more sort of practical effects, sort of heavy in terms of what they would show. Because again, you've got Davy Jones' first appearance in this. You have the Kraken. You have all other types of story elements in this, and new characters, and it was just bigger and bolder. And I really love Dead Man's Chest. I do. It's the perfect sequel, because, like I said, they take everything that the first one did and just made it bigger and just did more with it because they had bigger budget and it was more successful, which then led to A World's End. But we'll get to that one when we get there. But I absolutely love this film. And I'm so excited to be talking about it. So let's get straight into it, shall we? Talking about the cast. So we have Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow. Obviously, he's back. Orlando Bloom as Will Turner. Keira Knightley as Elizabeth Swann. Jack Davenport as Norrington. Bill Knightley as the absolutely incredible Davy Jones. Honestly, what they did here with Davy Jones, and I'll obviously go into more detail of it, but not just the practical effects, but the incredible acting skills of Bill Knightley. Bill Knightley's underrated as an actor. He's loved here in the UK, but he just feels like he's underrated in the rest of the world. But what Bill Knightley was able to do with the character, and then with the practical effect, the CGI on top of that, it was incredible, the absolute pinnacle. And to be honest with you, it wasn't matched and beaten until they did Thanos in Avengers. That was when I would say technology caught up and was able to actually match it and do it better in terms of sort of the special effects and the motion capture sort of thing. But for a long time, David Jones, Bill Knightley was the pinnacle of what you could do with a CGI character and make him look realistic and real. And I would say for a lot of movies, again, apart from Avengers, haven't been able to compare to it, haven't been able to beat it. It's this and Thanos. That's it. Anyway, Jonathan Pryce as Governor Weatherby Swan. Lee Arberg as Pitel, and Mackenzie Cook as Raggedy. I'm so glad they brought those two back. They were my favourites from the original film, and I'm glad they came back for the sequel. David McNally as Gibbs, David Bally as Cotton, Stellan Skarsgård as Bootstrap Bill, Tom Hollander as Cutler Beckett, Naomi Harris as Tina Delaney, Martin Kleber as Marty, David Scorfield as Mercer, and Alex Norton as Captain Bellamy. So that is your cast. As for the production, so like the first film, a lot went into the production of the first movie. And the same is here. So once again, I've broken it down so it's a lot more digestible. And it's easier for me. So we have the development, we have filming, and then we have visual effects. Right, so for the development, following the success of Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, the cast and crew signed on for 2 more sequels to be shot back to back, a practical decision on Disney's part to allow more time with the same cast and crew. Writer Ted Elliott and Terry Rossano decided not to make the sequels new adventures featuring the same characters as with the Indiana Jones and James Bond series, but to retroactively turn The Curse of the Black Pearl into the first of a trilogy. They wanted to explore the reality of what would happen after Will Turner and Elizabeth Swann's embrace at the end of the first film, and initially considered the Fountain of Youth as the plot device. They settled on introducing Davy Jones, the Flying Dutchman, and the Kraken. They also introduced the historical East Indian Trading Company, who for them represented a counterpoint to the themes of personal freedom represented by the pirates. Planning began in June 2004, and production was much larger than The Curse of the Black Pearl, which was only shot on location in St. Vincent. This time, the sequels would require fully working ships with a working Black Pearl built over the body of an oil tanker in Bayou La Bay, Alabama. By November, the script was still unfinished as the writers did not want director Gore Verbinski and producer Jerry Bruckheimer to compromise what they had written. So Verbinski worked with James Burkett to storyboard major sequences without need of a script, while Elliott and Rossano wrote a preparatory script for the crew to use before they finished the script. They were happy with. By January 2005, with rising costs and no script, Disney executives threatened to cancel the film but changed their minds. The writers would accompany the crew on location, feeling that the lateness of their rewrites would improve the spontaneity of the cast's performance. Whoa. So, wow. So they were going to cancel this. Imagine if this movie was cancelled. Like, don't get me wrong, like I said, Black Pearl is a perfect movie on its own and could have easily just been a standalone adventure movie, and we all would have loved it and enjoyed it and look back fondly on it as we do now today. But to think that if that was the only film and they never made more, that would have been such a shame, because like I said, I'm a big huge fan of this series. Granted, they got a bit loosey-goosey and a bit strange after the third film, but we'll get there when we get there. But even so, I love these films, and just to think that Disney were like, well, if you can't get the script done, we're going to cancel it. You know, I can understand where they come from on a business standpoint, but it would have been such a loss. But I'm glad that the movie wasn't cancelled. As for filming, so principal photography began on February the 28th, 2005 in Palos Verdes, beginning with Elizabeth's ruined wedding day. For Cutler Beckett's introduction, Rossio and Elliott had him arrive on shore in a boat while sitting on a horse standing in the boat. The duo had originally planned to use this introduction for Dom Raphael Montenegro in The Mask of Zorro. but the scene was cut for being deemed too expensive. Similarly, the Pirates crew wanted to cut the idea for budget reasons, in addition to feel that it would be unbelievable, or as the film's historical dismissed, suicidal. However, Verbinski promised Rossno and Elliott to use the idea, and the scene was filmed one day after weeks of planning and training. The crew spent the first shooting days at Walt Disney Studios in Los Angeles, including the interiors of the Black Pearl and the Edinburgh and Tortuga sets from the previous film were reused, having survived 3 hurricanes, although the main pier had to be rebuilt as it had collapsed in November. The crew had 4 tall ships at their disposal to populate the backgrounds, which was painted differently on each side for economy. One of the ships used was the replica of the HMS Bounty used in the 1962 film adaptation of Mutiny on the Bounty. On April the 18th, 2005, the crew began shooting at Dominica, a location Verbinski had selected as he felt it fitted the sense of remoteness he was looking for. However, this was also a problem. The Dominican government was completely unprepared for the scale of a Hollywood production, as well the 500-strong crew accompanying around 90% of the roads on the island, they had trouble moving around on the undeveloped surfaces. The weather also alternated between torrential rainstorms and hot temperatures, the latter of which was made worse for the cast who had to wear period clothing. At Dominica, the sequence involving Pelagosco, Cannibal Island, and the forest segment of the Battle of Isa Cruces were shot. Verbinski preferred to use practical props for the giant wheel and bone cages sequences, feeling long close-up shots would help further suspend the audience's disbelief. Dominica was also used for the Tia Dalmia's shack. Filming on the island concluded on May the 26th, 2005. The crew then moved to a small island in the Bahamas called White Cay for the beginning and end of the Isa Cruces battle, before production took a break until August, where in Los Angeles, the interiors of the Flying Dutchman was shot. On September the 18th, 2005, a crew moved to Grand Bahama Island to shoot ship exteriors, including the working Black Pearl and Flying Dutchman. Filming there was a tumultuous period, starting with the fact that the tank had not actually been finished. The hurricane season caused many pauses in shooting, and Hurricane Wilma damaged many of the access ways and pumps. Though no one was hurt, nor were any of the ships destroyed, principal photography was completed on September the 10th, 2005. The look of the Flying Dutchman was particularly inspired by old Dutch flutes, 17th century vessels which resembled galleons, and more specifically the Vasa, a massive Swedish warship which sank in Stockholm's harbour upon its maiden voyage in 1628. The ship was salvaged in 1961 and housed in a special museum in the Swedish capital. With its high, heavy, ornated stern, the ship provided a rich foundation for Rick Heinrich's wilder and more fantastical designs. One of the stuntmen, Johnny Depp's stunt double, Tony Angelotti, was injured on set while filming a human yo-yo stunt in July 2005. He was rushed to hospital, suffering internal bleeding after nicking a branch off his femoral artery. Damn. He lost 6 units of blood, had an ACL reconstruction, and spent a year in recovery before having to have the surgery all over again when a plate in his pelvis broke. He also suffers from PTSD. Despite this, he did continue filming for the following sequel at World's End, albeit doing lighter stunts like store choreography or working as a stunt coordinator. However, in 2007, Tony Angelotti did sue Disney and Jerry Bruckheimer for the injury. Can't blame him, but goddamn, that sounds painful. A human yo-yo stunt. Wow. Oh, see, a lot went in to the filming, a lot of strife. You can see now what Disney were like, look, we're going to cancel the movie at one stage because the writing and the filming and all the sort of troubles that they had. But I guess it's the issue when you're doing a period piece. If you want to shoot it all on location, you're going to have these issues with weather, you're going to have heat and stuff like that. And that's probably why Disney and a lot of these big production companies now all sort of shoot things in-house on a soundstage, because it's easier, it's cheaper, and you haven't got to worry about things like this. It's more contained, there's less room for error. So it makes sense. But it's one of those where it's like, whoa, a lot can go wrong when shooting on set. You have a lot more sort of things to worry about. But yeah. As for the visual effects, the Flying Dutchman's crew members were originally conceived by writer Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio as ghosts, but I always struggle with this guy's name. Gore Verbinski disliked this and designed them as physical creatures. Their hierarchy is reflected by how mutilated they were. Newcomers had low-level infections, which resembled Rosia, while veterans had full-blown undersea creature abilities. Babinski wanted to keep them realistic, rejecting a character with a turtle shell, and the animators watched various David Attenborough documentaries to study the movements of sea anemones and mussels. All of the crew are computer generated with the exception of Stellan Skarsgård, who played Bootstrap Bill Turner. Initially, his prosthetics would be augmented with CGI, but this was abandoned. Skarsgård spent 4 hours in the makeup chair and was dubbed Balubidis. I can't pronounce that. Bouilla Baisse, if you can pronounce that. Fair play to you. I can't. On set, Davy Jones had originally been designed with chin growths before the designers made the move to full-blown tentacles. The skin of the character incorporates the texture of a coffee-stained styrofoam cup, among other elements. To portray Jones on set, Bill Knightley wore a motion capture tracksuit that meant the animators at Industrial Light and Magic did not have to reshoot the scenes in the studio without him or on the motion camera stage. Knightley wore makeup around his eyes and mouth to splice into the computer-generated shots, but the images of his eyes and mouth were not used. Knightley only wore a prosthetic once with blue-coloured tentacles for when Will Turner, Orlando Bloom, steals the key to the dead man's chest from under his beard as he sleeps. To create the CGI version of the character, the model was closely based on a full body scan of Knightley, with Jones reflecting his high cheekbones. Animators studied every frame of Knightley's performance. The actor himself had blessed them by making his performance more quirky than expected, providing endless fun for them. His performance also meant new controls had to be stored. And finally, Jones' tentacles are mostly a simulation, though at times they were hand animated when they act as limbs for the character. The Kraken was difficult to animate as it had no real life reference until animation director Hal Hickel instructed the crew to watch King Kong vs. Godzilla, which featured a live octopus crawling over miniatures on the set. 2 pipes filled with 30,000 pounds or 14,000 kilograms of cement were used to crash and split the Edinburgh Trader, completing the illusion. Our miniature set masts and falling stuntmen shot on a blue screen stage. The scene where the Kraken spits at Jack Sparrow does not use computer generated spit. It was real slime thrown at Johnny Depp. Wow. To be honest, the biggest thing I love about this film, and I love about these films in general, is the practical and the visual. In the first movie, and obviously in all the following movies, they use a lot of practical sets. And I've said this multiple times. I think I've actually got a bit annoying how many times I mention it. But if you use practical sets, right, no matter how old the movie gets, it will stand the test of time, especially if those practical effects have done well. You know, practical sets, practical sort of things that are real. You know, they will stand the test of time. They always will. Whereas CGI, unless it's cutting edge and it's really, really well done, it won't always age very well. There are only a few movies that you watch where you see the sort of visual effects and the CGI and it looks terrible. And then you get somewhere it looks absolutely fantastic. And what I love about the Pirates movies is the fact of they use practical wherever and anywhere they could. Like I said, shooting on set, actually building the ships, even though they were in tankers, it was still, the aesthetics was the Black Pearl. The aesthetics were the Flying Dutchman, and it was all there. None of it was CGI. None of it was blue screen. It was all like they're on set, they're at sea, you know, bonza. And then when you look at the visual effects, Industrial Light and Magic, getting some of the best in the biz come to do the effects of Davy Jones and how incredible Davy Jones looks. If you watch it on Blu-ray now, or if you watch it on a standard definition, it doesn't matter what quality of the movie you watch it, it still looks outstanding and will always look outstanding because of how incredible the performances of Bill Knightley and how much went into actually designing and animating Davy Jones. That it's the thing that always reminds me the most of, like, when they're in the bone cages and they're swinging back and forth, or like when you first meet Davy Jones, and it is a sight to behold. And even now, from watching it, how many times I've seen it now at 26 years old, I am still in awe every time I see Davy Jones and his crew for the first time. And like, yes, I know they're CGI, but I just get so lost in the adventure, so lost in the story, that even though I know they're CGI, I just get lost and I feel like they're real. I just forget that they're CGI, and it's just like, yeah, that's real. Davy Jones is real. That's what Davy Jones looks like, you know? And that's what I love so much about these movies. But that is the introduction done. I've talked about the cast. I've talked about my love for it. I've talked about the production of the film. All we've got left to do now is to watch it. I haven't seen this movie in a while. Like, if you've listened to my Curse of the Black Pearl review, you know that I had planned to watch the first movie and then the second one for this review, then the third one. But I love the movie so much that when I put them on, my mum and my brother and my family joined me, and we ended up watching all three movies in the same day. But hopefully today that will be different. Then I'll be able to watch the second movie and then tell you my thoughts and feelings. But we will see. More than likely, I'll watch the second movie and I'll probably watch the third one afterwards. I'll let you all know in a second. But let's get into it, shall we? Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Let's go.
Hello, lovely listeners. This is Marie from the Two Girls, One Reusable Cup podcast, and you're listening to the Nerdstalgic Podcast.
So I've just this moment finished watching Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, and honestly, it's still perfect. It's still a wonderful, incredible movie adventure. You know, this movie's almost 3 hours long, but I tell you what, time stands still. It doesn't feel like it's too long. It doesn't feel too short. It just feels right. And my feelings after all these years, or should I say, after all these weeks, because I watched the series again quite recently, a while ago. But after all this time, the movie still holds up. And if anything, I would happily and confidently say that it's a perfect sequel. Because even though the first movie, Curse of Black Pearl, even though as it is, it's a very perfect, contained, singular story. This works well as a incredible continuation of what we had with Curse of Black Pearl, you know, with a bigger budget, more practical effects, more locations, a longer runtime, a longer sort of story narrative that also links into the final film, which we'll get to when we get to there. But the movie still holds up for what it is. And for what it is, it's a pirate adventure. And that's what it is. And that's just how it feels. And you get lost in it. I definitely got lost in it. Even though I'd watched this movie millions and millions of times, it's still one of those where my brain just shuts off and I just enjoy the visual soup that is being poured into my face. And I'm just like, just being drenched in it. But you know what? I love it. You know, it's very, I know it's a weird analogy, a way to explain a movie, but it just feels right. It just came to me and I was like, that feels right. It's sort of visual soup. But all weird analogies aside, it still holds up, you know. And if you're just going to listen to this part of the review, and if that's all you really want to know, then that is as much as I can say. Is it holds up, it's still perfect, and you haven't seen it, you're not doing yourself any favors in life. You need to go watch the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. They are that good. But if you want to stick around, I've got a lot more to talk about. So my thoughts on the story is that, as I said, it's a continuation of the Curse of Black Pearl. It's sort of going in a more adventurous side. It's going to more of the moving away from the singular sort of a linear narrative and going to a more bigger branching narrative, a bigger world, more characters, more events, more factions. Like, you've got the East Indian Trading Company, you've got Davy Jones and his crew in the locker, you've got the moment where Jack is a god sort of tribal leader with these cannibals. You also have the moments with the Kraken and the adventures the Kraken goes on. Well, I say adventures, but sort of you get little hints here and there that this beastie, this thing that Jack is running away from, and it's taking down ships. So you don't properly get to see it all in full until you need to, near to the end of the film, really. So you got all these different sort of story beats going on that what I love and what I found about this film as I was watching it, because obviously when you watch it for fun, you might not notice certain things here and there, but when you're watching something in terms of review, your mind is open to everything that you are being given, so you notice bits that you wouldn't notice before, or you would take in certain story points that didn't seem all important at first, but now you've got that analytical brain make a lot more sense if you're trying to sort of catch my jib of myself, if you to lack of better words. And what I mean by that is the fact of what I realized by watching this movie again is that it's a film in two halves, because you don't really see Davy Jones until about an hour into the movie, which is not a bad thing. I feel like that was a good idea, because if you show Davy Jones straight away, he loses all of his build-up. He loses all of his sort of incredible performance by Bill Knightley. All that is lost. It's still an incredible performance, but all that build-up, all that hype, all that fear and mystery is all shattered if you show him straight away. So you have to build up to him. So leaving him into an hour into the story, perfect idea. The first half of the movie, the first hour, is just Jack freaking out, being like, I've got to find this key. We don't know what the key is. We don't know what the key is for. We just know that he's after this key, and that he's more stranger than he is normally. He's wigging out. He's going manic. He's going crazy. He's literally at his wits' ends. And you go on this adventure where you find out that the East Indian Trading Company is now taking over. They've arrested Elizabeth Swann. They've arrested Will Turner, and that the only way that Will can actually save Elizabeth if he manages to get his compass and save Elizabeth. Now, that first half of the movie, that first hour, in on its own, could just be its own Pirates movie, really, because it's close to being its own story in the runtime, but in on itself, that could have been its own story that they could have done if they wanted to. Had the whole bigger, more grander moments on the island when Jack, as he's got the tribe and the bone cages and all that. They could have just done that as its own story. Then they could have done, say, the second half of the film in another movie. But to bring it all together makes the world feel bigger, makes it feel more huge, and feels like more of an adventure, more grandiose. That, each event is key to each other because each one affects the other. So obviously with Davy Jones and Jack, we don't know about it at first. He's going manic and crazy. He finds himself on the island. Will is hunting down Jack, and then from hunting down Jack, which I actually love this bit of detail, which I only really noticed again rewatching it today, was that as Will's going around asking people if he knows where Jack is, he meets this last guy, and I'm guessing he's a trader. And I had to laugh. I had to giggle to myself because I realised. So Will goes to this trader, and he goes, "Oh yeah, Jack. I've seen the ship with the black sails. I'm paraphrasing here, but I've seen the ship with the black sails. It's on an island where I sometimes go to trade spice." And he looks away for a minute, looks back at Will at the camera, has a bit of a smile on his face, and he goes, "Where I get the most delicious lamb meat." And he giggles. And it didn't occur to me all the other times I've watched it, but it occurred to me now. He knows it's not lamb meat. He knows who he's trading with. And obviously, as the story goes on a little bit further, and Jack is trying to escape, and he goes through one of the huts, and he sees the East Indian Trading Company, and he sees tins of paprika and spice. That trader knows it's not lamb meat. That trader is trading in human meat. He knows these cannibals of what they trade in. They trade in meat, really, with human meat. So he's selling a human meat, and it was just that thing of like, it's not lamb meat. You know that you were sending that boy to be eaten by the cannibals, and you knew that you were going to buy that meat from him. You knew it. Again, it's never mentioned in the story, but this is what I love about the Pirates films and why they're so clever. There are tiny little details everywhere you look. Not all of them are really important to the narrative. A lot of them are small motions and small little mentions here and there in the background that always have a payoff somewhere else in another scene in the background. Where, for example, when Elizabeth finally finds Jack on Tortuga, and he goes, "Oh, Elizabeth," and he turns around quickly to Mr. Gibson and goes, "Hide the rum." And that's obviously a reference to when last time he properly saw her, she burnt all of his rum. And it's little things like that. But going back to what I was saying, he knew it wasn't lamb meat that was on that island. He knew he was having succulent human buttocks and thigh and all that jazz. He knew, this man. But again, I jest. It's just one of those things that caught me on and made me laugh. But getting back to it with the story, yes, the first half is this adventure with Jack and him dealing with what he's dealing with and Will trying to find him. And then you have the second half, which is purely just full on Davy Jones. And you get more of the Kraken and you get that story in and of itself, and the incredible performance of Bill Knightley, which I'll get into all that specifically. But it is a movie in two halves, but it doesn't feel like that. Like if you're not paying attention to it, if you're not paying attention to it like I was, because I was being analytical for the review, it flows so well that it's just one big adventure that just has a beginning, middle, and end, and ends really, really perfectly, to be honest, and sets up sort of the next movie, which I remember when I had that sort of twist at the end, I was like, oh my God, I can't wait. I'm so excited for the next movie. And yeah, I just love this story. Just for the little bits of detail, the extra, you get to spend more time with Jack, you get to spend more time with the crew. Yeah, they bring back the favorites, like my two favorites from the last movie, where when that scene comes in and he goes, "Oh, we're not immortal now, so we've got to look after our immortal souls." And he goes, "You know, you can't read." And he goes, "It's the Bible. You get points for trying." I know I mentioned that in the last. I probably mentioned it in the introduction because it's a while since I've done the introduction. And I know I mentioned it in the last movie, but every time they guys show up, I'm glad they came back for this movie because it just wouldn't feel right without them. If you got to bring any part of the crew from the last movie, from the Black Pearl, from the first film, you had to bring these back. It was just standard, you know. So that's my thoughts on the story. It's very smart. It's very clever. It's very, very well done. It's very well crafted. It's pure adventure. And that's basically what you want from this series and this franchise. As for the cinematography of this film, it's absolutely gorgeous. Every single frame is a poster. There are many frames in this film where you could pause any moment, not even look, just pause the screen. At each scene, you could have a poster on your wall, or even be the poster of the movie. And you would know that's Pirates of the Caribbean straight away, just because how iconic the franchise is and became, but also just how beautiful the cinematography is. How that you can't even tell the difference with when they were recording on a soundstage and when they recorded on location. It's so seamless that if you wasn't to know that they recorded some on a soundstage and they recorded some on set, if you didn't know, you would feel like they just went out to the Bahamas, the Caribbean, and they recorded everything there at once. You would just think that. Because why wouldn't you? Because it's so seamless. So the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. And then you tie that in with the practical effects, how they built the big barges, as I mentioned in the introduction, for the boats. And all the boats are incredibly detailed and beautifully crafted, that they look like they should do for the time period. So you kind of fall into that as well. And then you have the practical effects, like when one of my favorite scenes is where they're all fighting in the church, and then you've got Will and you got Will Turner and you've got Norrington and Jack all on that big water wheel that's running around. And again, I would imagine that wasn't all practical effects. Some of it was probably practical, some of it probably wasn't. But it's done so seamlessly and the cinematography is done so well that you can't tell the moments when it's CGI and it's not. And even when you've got the amazing sword photography and you've got the stunt actors, I tried my best to really look to see if I could spot any sort of mistakes where like it wasn't edited right, where you can kind of see that that's not Will Turner and you can see that's not Norrington or Jack fighting. But it's done so well and it's shot in such a great angle. that you can't tell when it's not Orlando Bloom fighting with a sword. And it just adds to it. It adds to this whole feeling of this is real. This is a true pirate adventure, you know. And for that, you just get lost in it. I get lost in it. And this is why I love these films so much, is that you can easily just get lost in this whirlwind adventure of piracy, and mythical creatures and mythical stories like Calypso, and like, which, well, we won't see Calypso to the next movie, but like Calypso, like Davy Jones, like the undead, like Cursed Treasure, things like that. Like, this is everything you want in a pirates movie and more, you know. So for that, absolutely perfect. As for some of the characters, obviously, so Captain Jack Sparrow in this movie compared to who he was in the last one. In the last one, he's more of a Columbo in the first movie. He's very smart. He's very clever. He comes off as a fool, but he's actually 10 steps ahead of everybody. He knows what he's doing. Everything is intentional. Everything is practical. Everything is just going the way he had planned it to go. And even if it doesn't go the way he planned it to go, he's always very quick on his feet to be like, look, it went a bit awry, but I'll get myself out of this and I'll save the day. In this one, he loses that Columbo aesthetic, that kind of legendary status. He starts to lose it a bit. And I think the reason is that he's terrified. He is scared of losing his life. He's scared of dying. He's scared of being eaten by the beastie, by the Kraken. So in this one, he's a lot more manic. He's a lot more crazy. He's a lot more weirder than he normally was in the first film. Like, he's still a bit sort of, if anybody, well, it's an audio, but if anybody was wondering what I just did the whole sort of Jack Sparrow hands and lean back sort of thing. You can't help not do it. If you had to talk about Jack Sparrow, you have to do the weird hand thing. And I don't mind it, because it makes sense for the character, for the setting of the story, that he's going to be crazy. You know, yes, you know, there are times when he is quite conniving and he's quite snaky and quite lying and distrustful. But again, he's a pirate at the end of the day. That is what a pirate, well, is the kind of the legend of and the idea of what a pirate is and was, to be very sort of scummy, to be very full of lies and unruly and sneaky. And that's what he is. He's out for himself. He's out. He doesn't care about anybody else. He just wants to not be killed. And he'd happily give up his whole crew and his best mate and his love interest in order for him to live. And he almost does at the end of the film. But then he has that moment of, he looks at his compass, realizes what he wants the most is, like, you could say that it's Elizabeth Swann. You could say it's his crew. I think it's the ship. I think at the end of the day, Jack loves the Pearl. Him and the Pearl are inseparable. And I feel like when he looked at his compass and he looked in what he most desires and he went back to the ship, I think, me personally, that it was the ship that he most desires, and that he would much rather much go down with it than never see it again, you know. And then he comes back and sort of saves the day. And I'd say by the end of the movie, he is the Jack Sparrow that we saw in the first film. Now that he's more calm, he's kind of realised what I want is what I have. And that when he realises that he's going to die, it's more the fact of, instead of running away or being a coward, he's like, come on then, let's have it. Let's go. And he does. He goes down like a beast. And I never saw it coming when I first watched this movie. I don't think anybody else saw it coming. But when it happened, it was a shocker, and it was upsetting when I was very young, because I didn't know there was going to be another movie. As far as I know, that's it. Jack's dead, done. But obviously, it's Jack Sparrow. He is the sort of face of the franchise. You can't kill him off. So obviously, they brought him back for the next movie. But it was such a shock and a surprise. But I love the character and how he evolves in these three movies. Afterwards, he gets a bit silly. But, you know, if we ever get there, I'll explain it. But for this one, it makes sense for him to be this manic, crazy, more weirder version of the character than what we saw in the first one, because, again, it makes sense for the story. As for Davy Jones, like I said, you don't meet him until an hour into the movie. But when you do, Bill Nighy's sort of performance is so perfect that straight away you feel the danger, the power, the mystery because you starts off you just get the feet, or shall we say the claws, or I'm not sure really what they are, of an octopus crab sort of thing, but you see the feet sort of thing, and then it comes up, and then you get your first look of him, and he's smoking a pipe, and straight away you are transported to a completely different movie. The tone of the film changes completely, and from this point on, it's a lot more sort of serious and darker and brooding, and yeah, the tone changes completely, and sure it should do, because Jones is the god, or not even the god, but sort of the he is the ocean. He is the keeper of the sea. You know, it's his job to monitor what happens in the ocean. He's kind of like Aquaman in a way. Like, it's his job to make sure that everything that goes on in the sea he is aware of. And if anybody is to die at sea, he is to ferry them to the next place. And that whole mystery, the whole thing behind the Davy Jones character, straight away you get that with the performance, with the visuals. That is still top notch, still gorgeous, and it still looks. But there was not a moment where I looked at it and went, "That's aged a bit. That don't look too good." Everything about it still looks perfect, and I feel that it will still look perfect another 10 to 15, 20 years from now. It will still be a movie that people still look back at and go, "That looks gorgeous. That still works." And I just feel like as TVs get better, as DVD quality and that sort of technology improves, that so with this film, that it'll be one of them films that ages so well that it'll be like a fine wine in the future. It'll be like a true cult classic of like, this movie was the pinnacle of sort of like practical CGI, and it still is sort of considered beautiful and practical and gorgeous today, you know. But you can feel the power, you can feel the danger, but you can feel the heartbreak as well. Like, Jones has no human features. And one of the things that helps you in movies to really connect to a character are humanist sort of features. So features like when a human gets upset, and on the eyebrows, or on the nose where they get the cheeks all puffy and their eyes go red. It's human features and emotions that makes you really sort of connect to a character. And you know, you get it even like with Toy Story. The reason you cry at Toy Story is not just because of the story, but because the human sort of qualities, facial features on the toys. You get it with like Transformers and like movies like with dogs and animals and things like that. It's not just music and cinematography. It's those features on a face, or those set tones that really sort of make you feel real emotion for the scene. And it's Bill Nighy's performance and the incredible practical and physical effects, as well as obviously the motion capture, that really sort of bring home the heartbreak. You can feel how heartbroken Jones is, and you don't really get a sense of that properly until the last movie. But everything about it is just gorgeous and heartbreaking and powerful and mysterious. And I'm so glad that they left it till an hour into the movie to introduce him, because it just makes his presence ever more terrifying and wonderful and powerful, because he's not always there. He's only there when he needs to be, but every time he's there, he's a tour de force. And it's not just him, it's his whole crew. His whole crew obviously have been changed and corrupted, and to be a lot more like the sea. And even their performances are really interesting and really, really good. And that everybody's performance in this movie is just incredible. But this whole Flying Dutchman crew and Davy Jones, so believable, so realistic, and that it's terrifying to think how close they got to be like, this looks so real, you know. Yeah. But I just wanted to mention that one because how much I love it. Now I'm going to possibly ruin some people's day. It depends. If I was to ask you the question, what is the overarching story of Pirates in the Caribbean, the first 3 movies, right? What would you say is the overall narrative? Now, whatever you said it's probably right for you. For me, I feel like Pirates, really, the first 3 films are a love story. Now, bear with me. Allow me to explain. I vaguely remember myself hinting at it a little bit at the introduction of the first movie, and I talked about it in the review of The Curse of Black Pearl, but I don't remember going into full detail. But I believe that the Pirates of the Caribbean movies are really a love story, because if you break it down into each character, it makes a lot more sense. So Jack Sparrow, for example, he has a deep love of the sea. He wants to be a pirate forever. He wants to sail the seas forever. His love, next to the Black Pearl, is to be at sea forever. And in the first movie, the idea of being immortal, of being able to travel the sea forever, to never to die, is very appealing to him until he realizes what comes with it, and then he decides it's not for him. Then in this movie, he's realizes that his life's coming to an end, so he's going to try everything he can do to make sure that he stays alive, and he will go through to almost to the ends of the earth, to find the dead man's chest, to take David Jones's heart, to make David Jones basically to call off his beastie and to have control of Jones, because if he has control of Jones, he can sail practically forever, and he hasn't got to worry about no repercussions to him. And then when you have the World's End, same sort of idea, same sort of story. But he then decides, well, if I kill Davy Jones, I get to rule the Flying Dutchman and I can go forever. And again, he realizes that that's not what he wants to do. And then you can even say the same for Strange Tides, that the Fountain of Youth, and that he can live forever, and that he decides, well, actually, no, he wants to save the life of, I think Jessica, her name is, in that story. That's Jack's story, really. His whole arc is staying alive forever, for being able to sail the sea, to sail the thing that he loves forever. That's what he wants to do. So that's his love story. Then you have Will and Elizabeth. They obviously, it makes quite sense. Their love for each other, they will do anything for each other. They will want to save each other, be there for each other. That is their story. Davy Jones, though, is the most heartbreaking story of them all. And I don't want to go into full detail about Jones here. I will go into full detail about Jones's heartbreak in the next movie. But I just want to mention it here that Jones has the biggest heartbreak, because when you find out in the next movie what happened to him and how he became the captain of the Flying Dutchman, because there's little hints to it in this film where Calypso mentions about Davy Jones, that he was a pirate and that he fell in love with a woman, and that he was that led him to basically getting corrupted, and that he ended up becoming the man that he is. Obviously, we get that's Calypso's version of it, but then we find out in the next movie the true version of it, the real version from David Jones himself, and then we learn the true reason as to why he became the way he is. But not just the hints by Calypso, there's also the hints that Jack knows as well. When Jack basically says to him, he goes, "Oh, Will Turner over there, he's in love with a woman and he was meant to get married." And you can see there's a moment in David Jones where his idea and feelings towards this person completely changes, and Jack tries to use and manipulate him in that sort of way to kind of get what he wants. And then the way David Jones then treats Will Turner in this movie is very sort of indicative of the fact of jealousy and hate, and kind of wants him to suffer as much as possible because he's in love. And there's a moment in this that I really love. Again, I didn't notice it till watching it earlier, was that when Will walks in, Calypso takes a shining to him straight away. And I can't remember the words exactly, but it's kind of hinting at that he's going to be, and again, spoilers, I do apologize if you haven't watched the last movie, probably best to stop listening now. But you know, actually, I'm not going to spoil it, but basically give you the hints to what is going to happen in the next film with Will. and that she's incredibly drawn to him, and that she is flirting with him. And you could easily say just the fact of, Orlando Bloom, Will Turner, he's a very handsome bloke. He is. But I feel like it's more to that with Calypso, that she is kind of hinting to who he is going to become, and what he's going to do and need to do, and that, like Calypso and David Jones, that their souls are intertwined, and that she lured David Jones in and corrupted him and turned him into the man he is, that she probably would have tried to do the same with Will if the events of the next movie possibly didn't change that. But I feel like it's very big foreshadowing to what is to come with the last movie, and I love it for that. But yeah, I would say that the Pirates of the Caribbean movies are really a love story. Once you take all the adventure out of it, you take all of the swashbuckling and the cursed treasure and Davy Jones and all that, and if you just look at the basis of what the story is, it's each character's love of something is driving them to live. Basically, it's Jack's love of the sea, it's his drive to keep going. It's Elizabeth and Will's love of each other, which drives them to continuously make sure that they are safe and that they can save each other and be together forever. David Jones the same. It's his love that made him do what he does, and it's because of that love is why he is the way he is. And again, I'll talk about it more when we get to the sort of the last movie. But it is a love story, and I feel like knowing that really makes the story better and more impactful, because when you realize it, you can appreciate those small little bits, those little moments of love for each character that each character has, that it kind of just flushes out the story a lot more and makes it a lot more fun and interesting and a lot more bigger, grander adventure than what you see on the surface. So yeah, that's one thing that I noticed and I wanted to mention. Now, before we get into my overall thoughts and we get into a bit of trivia, I want to talk about I want to have a bit of a pirate history lesson. I did this for the last one where I talked about the code, because it's mentioned all the time in the last movie about pirate code, about pirates and the laws that they follow and the things like that. And I wanted to talk about sort of, for this episode, the origins of Davy Jones and the Kraken. So the origins of Davy Jones is unclear, and many conjectural and folklore explanations have been told. The earliest known reference of the negative connotation of Davy Jones occurs in the 4 Years' Voyage of Captain George Roberts by Daniel Defoe, published in 1726 in London. The Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue by Francis Grouse, written in 1785 and published in 1811, includes the definitions David Jones, the devil, the spirit of the sea, called Nekan and Draga in the North countries, such as Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, and Davy Jones Locker, the sea, written within a foreign affairs segment within the newspaper Chester Chronicle in 1791. The term safe in Davy Jones's locker was used to convey that a person was lost, therefore to be within Davy Jones's locker was to be lost at sea. Then we had a 1898 dictionary of phrases and fable connections to Davy Jones, or to the word Davy, to the West Indian Duppy or Duffy, and Jones to biblical Jonah. And I quote, "He's gone to Jones' locker, i.e. he's dead. Jones is a corruption of Jonah, the prophet, who was thrown into the sea. Locker, in seaman's phrase, means any receptacle for private stories, and Duffy is a ghost or spirit among the West Indian people. So the whole phrase is, he is gone to the place of safekeeping where Duffy Jonah was set to." The reference to Duppy and Duffy were deleted in later versions of Brewer's dictionary. David Jones, a real pirate, although not a very well-known one, living on the Indian Ocean in 1630s. Duffer Jones, a notoriously myopic sailor was often found himself overboard. A British pub owner who supposedly threw drunken sailors into his ale locker and then gave them to be drafted on any ship. And then a linguists consider it most plausible that Davy was inspired by Saint David of Wales, whose name was often invoked by Welsh sailors, and Jones by the biblical Jonah. So that's a kind of proposed origins of the tale. It's not entirely clear as where it originated, where it began, who used it, or when it started being used. But there are loads of different references of when it was used in different time periods. Each person has a different idea of where it comes from. Does it come from? Is it biblical? Does it come from the Bible? Is it from old stories? Is it just that one sailor happened to go overboard all the time because getting drunk, and then it was that idea of, oh, there goes Jones again, sort of thing? And did it start quite humble and then get negative connotations later? It's one of those where it's quite interesting. As for the Kraken, so the origins of the legend, the origins of the Kraken myth, can be traced back to ancient Scandinavian folklore in Old Norse. The term Kraken is thought to have evolved from the word crake, which referred to an unearthly animal or something twisted or curled. In Norse mythology, tales of the Kraken emerged as part of the rich tapestry of sea monsters that haunted the minds of seafaring Vikings. These legends described a colossal squid-like creature capable of pulling down entire ships with its powerful tentacles. Over time, the Kraken became intertwined with maritime superstitions, with Norwegian fishermen purposely watching the beast, reportedly watching the beast attack ships in the distance and conjure up all sorts of sea mischiefs. Now, there is a real life Kraken to a point. There are giant squids in the ocean. We know this. They've been found. They live deep under the ocean, but they have been found to be picked up and to sometimes floating around sort of the top part of the ocean. Again, they're not huge. They're not big enough to take down a whole ship. But if you think about with the story, the idea that if you are on a Viking ship, which is not very, very big, and then you saw a giant octopus or some sort of giant creature in the water, I mean, you've got to imagine when you're at sea, there is no light. If you're lucky, if there's any moonlight, that might light the way. But even then, if you've ever been out to sea, it is pitch black constantly. If you turned off all the lights on your boat, you would be in pitch blackness, right? So you've got to imagine they're traveling from Norway to, say, like Newfoundland, which would be Canada and New England and that side of the world, really, in America. They're doing that whole journey, which is a rough sea, very dangerous sea. A lot of ships have gone down there because of how dangerous the ocean is, right? And they're doing that whole voyage in a rough sea with practically no light at all, just sort of candle light or lanterns. The blackness of the dark really provokes the human imagination to run wild. So I'm not saying that they didn't see a creature, but I can understand where the idea comes from of giant creatures, giant things that would pull you down to the bottom of the ocean and have huge suction cups that would suck your face right off and that sort of thing. Like, I completely understand where the idea started and why the myth started, but I just wanted to give a quick sort of history lesson of the idea of Davy Jones, where that began, and sort of the idea and origins of the Kraken. And I find it interesting that David Jones, the devil, the spirit of the sea, called Nekan or Draga in the North countries such as Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, that the whole idea, the name behind Davy Jones, really has a connection to the Norse, which then the Norse mythology is the people that sort of brought up the ideas, stories of the Kraken. And I like how they interconnect. That part of it, when I did my research, really, really sort of made me smile, and I thought I had to mention it in this review. But my overall thoughts, going back to it, of this movie is that, if you couldn't tell by now, I absolutely love it. I adore it. I think this movie is a 10 out of 10. It's perfect. And I really, really like it. I don't have any moments in this film where I can sit here and nitpick of like, this bit, I didn't like this bit, didn't like that bit. There are no moments like that. This is generally one of them films that from start to finish, I love it. And that if it's on TV, I will stop what I'm doing and sit and watch it. And as I mentioned in the introduction of this, and as I mentioned in the last review, when I was watching Curse of the Black Pearl, as soon as it finished, I was about to go upstairs and do my review. And my mom and that were like, let's put the next one on. And I, even though I knew I had stuff to do, I was like, yeah, all right, I'll watch the next movie. And it's the same thing happened today. Watching the film on my own, my parents come in, they asked me what one it is. I told them it's the second one. Straight, my mom was like, oh, did you watch the first one then? I said, no, I didn't watch the first one. I'm just watching the second one. She goes, oh, when this finishes, you've got to put the first one on so we can watch it all together. And she's currently downstairs watching the first one all over again. So it's not just the power this movie has in my family, but it's just the power these films have that everybody loves them and enjoys them. I haven't really met anybody that doesn't like the Pirates movies. And I'm sure there are out there. I'm sure there are people out there who don't like these films. But the majority of people that I've met really like these films. And these are films that you will stop what you're doing to watch them. And for that, it just shows how good these are. So my overall thoughts is the fact of if you haven't watched it and you've gotten this far, go do yourself a favor. Go watch the film again. Go watch the second one again. If you've already watched the first one after listening to that review, go watch it again for the second film or even the first one. We'll watch the whole trilogy again. They're just great. So I love them. I think they're absolutely great. And I even if I tried to look for negative things, I don't think I'd be able to find any. Or I would just feel like if I did find any, I just wouldn't feel like they'd be worth mentioning. So I just love this film. Anyway, as before we wrap up, I just want to mention some trivia. So at around 2 hours into the film, the scene when Jack Sparrow calls David Jones fish-faced and sings to him, goes, I got a jar of dirt, I got a jar of dirt, and guess what's inside it? That was all unscripted and improvised by Johnny Depp. Most of the reactions of the rest of the characters and cast were real. And obviously, I already knew this bit of trivia. I learned this ages and ages ago. But it always makes me smile whenever that scene comes on. And I know that it's improvised, that it wasn't in the script. Like, if it was in the script, absolutely incredible writing and sort of ingenious. But it's even more ingenious to know that Johnny Depp just went, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna go off the cuff. I'm just gonna do something. And then he did it, and now it's comedy gold, and it just lives rent free in my mind all the time. Like, I don't know if he intentionally fell down them stairs or he actually did fall down the stairs, but either way, it just works perfectly in comedic wise and makes so much sense for Jack Sparrow and who he is and as a character and where he is personally in the story at that point. It all works fantastically. And then when you look at the faces, they'll look at each other like, what the fuck, what's going on? Why? This is not in the script. And I just love that. I'm glad they kept it in because it just works so well for his character. Also, Johnny Depp's frequent collaborator, Tim Burton. So this bit, I love this bit of trivia here. So Johnny Depp's frequent collaborator, Tim Burton, he obviously worked with him with like Edward Scissorhands and Corpse Bride and Sweeney Todd, to name just a few. Tim Burton contributed some of the conceptual designs of several crew members aboard the Flying Dutchman. Mwah! Shit, like that blew me away when I read it, because it just shows like we could have had a whole Tim Burton crew. And now, I'll be honest with you, I really, really want a Tim Burton directed Pirates of the Caribbean movie, just so I can see the wild, wacky mind of Tim Burton with pirates. And I couldn't find what I couldn't find the conceptual designs, and I couldn't find what crew members he designed. So I don't know if those designs went through or if they were used in the final draft of the movie. But when I learned this a bit of trivia out, I actually tried to look back at the crew and I was like, what looks the most Burton-esque? It was really hard to tell because they all look fantastic. So I don't know. But I just love that thing. It was like Tim Burton was like, yeah, I'll do some designs, because Tim Burton, he's such an artist. I can't believe I actually haven't reviewed any Tim Burton movies. I need to make that a change. I really need to. I'll get onto it as soon as possible, I promise. Next bit of trivia. So Gore Verbinski initially rejected casting director Denise Kamen or Dennis Kamen, suggestions to cast Naomi Harris as Tina Dalma, saying that she was too young for the role. Kamen insisted he give her a screen test. Finally, Harris's mother came with her for the audition, also serving as her dialect coach since Dalma speaks in a partial Jamaican accent. Gorbavinsky originally wanted David Jones to be Dutch, as he is the captain of the Dutchman. Bill Knightley, however, responded, "I don't do Dutch, so I decided on Scottish." What a great line. It works. A Scottish, obviously. Sorry, Chat Tsunami, for that terrible Scottish impression. But Scottish works so perfectly for David Jones, and the character in this film, that I just feel like it works better if he was Scottish. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see if he was Dutch. But I don't feel like just because he was called the Dutch man, he should have been Dutch. That just feels like putting two and two together, but when two things shouldn't be put together. But I don't know. The Kraken was difficult to animate, as it had no real life reference until animation director Hal T. Hickle instructed the crew to watch King Kong vs. Godzilla 1963, which had a real octopus crawling over miniatures. One more. A popular pirate punishment was marooning. The pirate who was being punished was put on an island and left sometimes for a few days. Blah, 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 for a few days, sometimes permanently. The dead man's chest is a small rocky island, so called because the rocks reminded pirates of a rib cage. It has no water or shade and is so low that waves frequently wash over it. To be marooned on the chest was to be given a death sentence under the broiling Caribbean sun. Deleted footage of Tortuga from Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of Black Pearl, was added to the final cut of this movie. The dice game that Will Turner plays with David Jones is called Liar's Dice, a gambling game which each player has to make consecutively higher bids based upon how many of each die they claim are on the table. 2, 3s, 4, 5s, etc., until the player is called a liar, in which case all the dice are shown and it's seen if the bid is correct. Normally, a player only loses a die when caught in a lie and is not out of the game until he has lost all of his dice. So, that is all the trivia today. I hope you really, really enjoyed it. To be honest, as you can tell, I absolutely love and adore these movies. So I could talk about them all day, every day, but we will be here absolutely forever. And I don't want to be here forever because I got other movies and video games and books to read, play, and watch. So I haven't got the time. But I really hope that you enjoyed it. It'll probably be a while before I do At World's End. Because I've got a few things in the pipeline for June and for the summer period. So it will be a while before that one comes, but rest assured when it does, I will let you all know and I'll be incredibly ecstatic. You'll be able to tell anyway, because if you hear a squeal and a high-pitched sort of like girly scream, you just know. If you hear that on the wind, that's me, because I'll be watching the next movie and it'll be soon to be time to be talking about it. But until then, thank you very, very much for listening. I've been your host, Luke the Human. You've been listening to the Nerdstalgic Podcast, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.